students. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for a brand new topic in science class, and I hope you are ready and raring to go. Some people say that I can be the life of the party because I am a fun guy. And that is our topic this week, fungi. Fungi. Now, we're not talking about me, obviously, all this week. We're talking about the next kingdom of organisms here on planet Earth. So let's do a quick review before we get into fungi. We have learned about what so far in terms of the kingdoms. We learned about the kingdom Monaran, all of the Monarans, the bacteria in that kingdom. We've learned about kingdom Protista, all of those protists from last week, those cool unicellular critters. And so this week we enter our third kingdom of organisms, the kingdom of the fungi. And fun gals, too. Anyway, the fungi, we're going to be spending this week on fungi. And by the way, fungi is plural, fungus is singular. So I might be a fungus, but several of me could be fungi. So fungus, fungi. There's a fungus among us, you might say. So let's stop with the jokes and the puns and let's get into our topic for the week, shall we? So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about fungi? Well, many people, when they hear about a fungus, they automatically think of these organisms here, the mushrooms. And that's not incorrect. No, I mean, mushrooms are an example of an organism in the fungi kingdom. But there are others. In fact, there are many other types of fungi in addition to just mushrooms. So let's begin with a more general description of fungi, and then we'll work down to some specific examples. So what kinds of critters are in kingdom fungi? Well, they are plant-like organisms, and keep in mind, they're not plants. If you remember earlier in the year when we talked about taxonomy and classification, Aristotle, when he examined these types of critters popping up out of the ground, he just considered them to be plants because, after all, they grew out of the ground and they kind of look like, well, plants. But we know today that they are not plants. They are plant-like in the sense that, well, they kind of grow up with a structure that looks like a stem and a flower. We'll discover this week that they are not stems and flowers. But one of the big differences here is that they lack chlorophyll. You know full well now that plants are autotrophic organisms because they possess chloroplasts in their cellular structure. And these chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, which enables them to undergo photosynthesis, and they can make their own food. Fungi, they can't do that. As fun as they might be, they cannot make their own food because they lack chlorophyll. And as a result, fungi are not autotrophic, but rather they are heterotrophic. They are heterotrophic organisms like you and I. Animals are heterotrophic as well because we lack chlorophyll and we cannot make our own food from sunlight energy. In fact, if you recall, that is exactly what heterotrophic means. They cannot make their own food. So if you can't make your own food from sunlight energy, that means you're going to have to get your food from another source. So just like we have to find our food from other sources, so do fungi. And so the biggest category we're going to be focusing on this week probably is the characteristic of fungi of feeding. We're going to be digesting 3 different characteristics. The first one will be feeding, and we're going to spend some time talking about that. We will also discuss the differences in their structure as well as their reproduction, because not all fungi reproduce the same way. And so we'll be discussing all 3 of these characteristics: feeding, structure, and reproduction. So let's begin with feeding. As we've already mentioned, I'll mention it again. It's worthy of restating. All fungi are heterotrophs, and we know what that means. They can't make their own food. They can't make their own food, again, because they lack chlorophyll. So they have to get their food from other sources. And one of the things they do is they grow on their food and absorb it chemically. Now, some of you might be wondering, why in the world are we looking at this nasty foot? Well, if you look closely at this foot, you'll see this individual, which, by the way, this is not my foot. Okay, just so you know. Let's be clear on that. This is not my foot. But this foot has some toe cheese growing on it. How many of you have ever heard of toe cheese before? Yeah. Well, toe cheese is not a cheese, believe it or not. It's a fungus. This is foot fungus, otherwise known as athlete's foot. If your toes ever look like this, it could be because you are infected with a fungal growth. A living organism is chowing down on your flesh. I know it's not very nice to think about, but it's true. Athlete's foot is a fungus that is growing on you as its food source, and it's absorbing you and your flesh as it chows down. I know that is kind of gross when you think about it, isn't it? But think about it nonetheless. That, by the way, there is a great way to avoid getting foot fungus, and that is by washing, cleaning, and drying your feet thoroughly. Putting shoes and socks on without drying between your toes first is just an invitation for foot fungus to grow. Taking showers in locker rooms, public locker rooms, for instance, without wearing shower shoes and then not drying your toes, that's like a neon light invitation for foot fungus to be growing between your toes. Make sure you keep your toes clean and dry. Dry is the key term here. So if you don't want your toesies looking like this person's toesies, keep your feet dry, or you too can be home to foot fungus. Now, another characteristic here of the feeding of fungi is that some of them actually go out and capture their prey. Now think about that for a moment. You know, when you say capture prey, you probably think of, well, animals capture prey. Well, so do some fungi. And so let's check out this video now of a fungus that goes out and captures its prey. This is, I find this a fascinating video to watch, kind of creepy if you think about it. Let me just center this up a little bit more and make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Yeah, the BBC has such awesome videos on it. I love their science videos, but check this video out of a fungus that feeds upon ants and does something pretty funky with them. Check it out.
Incredibly, 80% of all insects live in jungles. Few are more successful than the ants. There can be 8 million individuals in a single hectare. But jungle ants don't have it all their own way. These bullet ants are showing some worrying symptoms. Spores from a parasitic fungus called cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their minds. Its infected brain directs this ant upwards. Then, utterly disorientated, it grips a stem with its mandibles. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony. It seems extreme, but this is the reason why. Like something out of science fiction, the fruiting body of the cordyceps erupts from the ant's head. It can take 3 weeks to grow, and when finished, the deadly spores will burst from its tip. Then any ant in the vicinity will be in serious risk of death. The fungus is so virulent it can wipe out whole colonies of ants. And it's not just ants that fall victim to this killer. There are literally thousands of different types of cordyceps fungi, and remarkably, each specializes on just one species. But these attacks do have a positive effect on the jungle's diversity, since parasites like these stop any one group of animal getting the upper hand. The more numerous a species becomes, the more likely it will be attacked by its nemesis, a cordyceps fungus.
Wow. Did you see that? Sometimes that affliction is called the zombie ants. Because that fungus gets into their brain and basically takes them over, causing them to climb up high so that the fungi can burst out of their brain and send spores out and take over a whole population of ants. That is pretty freaky. Imagine if we had things like that affected humans. Ooh, goodness. All right, so let's move on. Now, most fungi are decomposers. Thankfully, there aren't too many of those fungi that actually go out and capture their prey like that cordyceps. But most are decomposers, which means they break down organic material once it is dead. If you've ever spent any time in the woods or near the woods, you've probably seen mushrooms growing up out of the ground. You've seen mushrooms coming out of dead logs or dead trees. Those are the typical fungi that we think of when we think of fungi, and that is the predominant way in which most of them obtain their food source. They decompose it from dead organic material and then restore the nutrients and the minerals back to the soil so that other things can grow from it. Now, some fungi live symbiotically. That sounds like a good vocabulary term. The word symbiotically means symbiosis, or two or more organisms living in close relationship with one another. Now, sometimes that might be a positive relationship for both. Maybe it could be a negative relationship for one. There are different types of symbiosis. But here's an example of a particular organism, actually, that is two organisms in one. Again, if you've ever spent time in the woods, you may have seen or heard of lichen, Lichen, grows on dead trees and rocks. And lichen is actually a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae. The fungus basically provides the structure, and the algae provides food. So I have a little clip here I'm going to show you of this type of symbiotic relationship. Check it out. Yummy. Lichens. Thank you, Francis Chi Films. All right. That was pretty cool. So, lichen, symbiosis at work right there. So, symbiosis, as I said before, is a close relationship. And again, not all symbiotic relationships are the same. In the case of the lichen, and here's another picture of lichen, and there are many different types of lichen, but it's a positive relationship where both of them benefit. Again, the lichen provides the structure, and the algae create the food source. But here's a little cartoon regarding symbiosis in relationships. And you may know that there is a symbiotic relationship between rhinos and a particular bird. I don't remember the bird species offhand, but if you look at that rhino, I always give, and all you do is take, take, take. Well, that illustrates a particular type of symbiosis. And so let's talk about the two kinds of symbiosis here. The first one is called parasitism. Parasitism may sound and look like parasite. It's because it is. A parasite is an organism that feeds off another organism called a host. Parasitism is a type of symbiotic relationship where only one of the two organisms benefit. Let's say, think of a parasite. Think of a tick or a mosquito. Yeah, they land on you and they bite you and they suck your blood out of you, and they are benefiting, right? Are you benefiting at all from them, however? I don't think so. So that would be an example of parasitism. Think of your own relationship with your parents at this point in your lives. As adolescents, you're probably living at home. You get the comfort of having a roof over your head and warmth during the winter, the food from the fridge, the clothes on your back. You are benefiting tremendously from your parents. But are your parents really benefiting from you? Or are you just a parasite? Think about that for a moment as we explore the second type of symbiotic relationship called mutualism. Mutualism is symbiosis in the sense that both organisms benefit. Let's take, I can't think of the the name of the fish, but there's a little fish that has a mutualistic relationship with sharks. And they go into the shark's mouth and they clean the dirt off of the shark's teeth and swim in and out of the gills of the shark. So the shark is benefiting from this little fish species that is cleaning up after the shark. And the little fish species is also benefiting because it's getting protected by the shark. There ain't no bigger fish that want to mess with this little fish, because if it does, it's going to be swallowed up by the shark. So now think about your relationship with your parents. Are you doing anything to benefit your parents? Are you doing chores at home? Taking the trash out, washing the dishes, doing your laundry, putting your clothes away? Are you benefiting your parents by helping out? If so, then you and your parents are involved in a mutualism relationship. If, however, you do nothing at home but complain, then you could be called a parasite. Why don't you talk it over with your folks at home and get back in touch with me and let me know whether you are experiencing mutualism at home or parasitism. I hope it's mutualism. All right, so the feeding behaviors of fungi can manifest itself in a variety of ways. So now let's talk about the structure of fungi, how they're put together. Well, some fungi are unicellular. There's a prefix you should be very familiar with by now, uni. Think of unicycle, unibrow. Uni means one. So some fungi are unicellular, meaning they are made of only one cell. In fact, our lab activity this week, we are going to be exploring some unicellular fungi. We'll also be examining some multicellular fungi, but we're actually going to watch some unicellular fungi reproduce. But we'll get to that later. All right, some fungi are multicellular. And again, you're familiar with the prefix by now, multi, which means many. So Mushy the mushroom here in this picture would be an example of a multicellular fungi because it is made of, well, many cells. Now, multicellular fungi are made of structures called hyphy. Hyphy are thread-like tubes. In fact, most of the structure of hyphy are found beneath the surface. What you see popping out of the structure or out of the soil when you see a mushroom, for instance, is only its reproductive structure. Most of the body, if you will, of a multicellular fungi is under the surface, and they are called hyphy. These are thread-like tubes that have many nuclei, which we'll get into in a moment. But let me show you a little video clip here, which illustrate the hyphy of these multicellular fungi. So let's play this video now.
Let's take a little bit of a look in the soil, see what we can find. This food web in here has got just more diversity than almost any place else on Earth. Soil is where diversity really lies. We look above ground and we say, ooh, look at all the plant species here. And we go, oh, there's 10, 15 different plants in here. High diversity doesn't have a candle to what's here in the soil. We're looking at, probably about 100 miles of fungi per gram of soil, per teaspoon of soil in here. When we look at 1 teaspoon of soil, and so it's like that much, we're looking at 40,000 species of bacteria. We're looking at probably 20,000 species of fungi in that one.
These are species, not individuals.
Not individuals. Because now when we go to individuals, we're looking at 1,000 million individual bacteria split amongst 40,000 species. So it's a huge diversity that I'm holding right there in the palm of my hand.
I would have to say, that's a living organism.
Yeah.
That's alive.
Mm-hmm. It's a community. You can sort of think of this as New York City.
That's pretty amazing. And those thread-like tubes, it kind of look like a root network. They're not roots. They're hyphy. These hyphy have cells which contain many nuclei within each cell. And that's what enables them to grow very quickly. In fact, some of these multicellular fungi can grow so quickly under the ground, they can get up to 40 meters per hour. Now, I don't know if you realize how fast that is, but imagine you're at a football game, okay? And, maybe the average football game takes an hour to play, okay? And you're there sitting on the 50-yard line, the midfield line of an American football field. And let's imagine that you transformed yourself into a little mole. And you, as a little mole, could burrow through the soil. Now, imagine starting at the midfield line and burrowing a hole from the midfield line to the end zone. How long do you think it would take you to dig a hole, a tunnel, from the midfield line to the end zone? I think it would take a little bit more than an hour, don't you think? Some of these multicellular fungi can actually do it. Now, obviously, the conditions have to be just right, but imagine going that distance in an hour. These creatures, these fungi, are kind of freaky if you think about it, in the sense that they can go out very quickly under the surface to seek out their food source and chow upon it. And with that lovely thought in mind, I think we're going to save our reproduction and the different types of fungi for tomorrow. So contemplate those thoughts, if you will, as I say for today, bye-bye.